Guess what? The United States and Cuba are now in another row over trademark. Cuba says that the U.S. is violating international laws protecting brands and trademarks over the use of the word Havana Club for a brand of rum. The U.S. Supreme Court granted multinational rum producer Bacardi the rights to use the Havana Club name. Now, the U.S. Foreign Office for Assets Control is blocking Cuba from defending its rightful ownership of this trademark, and Cuba has accused them as much. This is what they had to say. The decision by the U.S. Supreme Court appeared to put an end to the long legal battle that saw Cuba Export and his French associate Pernod Ricard struggle to retain their rights to use the name Havana Club and win the rights to sell the rum in U.S. markets. The Cuban-French joint venture has been disputing for decades with Bermuda-based Bacardi, which sells rum made in Puerto Rico in the United States under the same brand name. Now, this is the actual rum in question. This is the actual Havana Club, the actual Cuban version of the rum that is sold to the public. Unfortunately, those of you in the United States don't actually have access to this wonderful, wonderful 7-year-old rum. Now, Havana Club was actually started in Cuba in 1878, but was sold to the Bacardi Corporation in 1935. The family that owned Havana Club eventually sold to the larger rum producer. Now, after the revolution in Cuba in 1959, Cuba, under Castro, nationalized the rum-producing service, and it became a state enterprise. Now, after it was nationalized after the revolution, the manufacturer continued to produce it in Puerto Rico. Now, Cuban authorities actually registered the name Havana Club in the U.S. in 1976, and this is what the Cuban Foreign Ministry was saying. Despite the bilateral conflict, the Cuban government respects even now over 5,000 U.S. brands and patents registered in Cuba. Which means despite all the terrible history between the United States and Cuba, Cuba has continued to respect the intellectual property rights and the trademarks of U.S. products inside Cuba, even though at no point were they actually obligated to, and philosophically probably shouldn't have at all. Now, this is a very typical thing for capitalism to do, speak very much to intellectual property rights or property rights in general and trademark and ownership, and then turn around and then completely violate them. I mean, this is supposed to be the holy grail of capitalism, the ownership of property, the rightful ownership of intellectual ideas and trademarks, and yet here they are basically taking something that belongs to somebody else and claiming it as their own. You could hardly say Havana Club made in Puerto Rico. I mean, come on. I've had the Bacardi Havana Club and I've had the Cuban Havana Club. Guess which one tastes better? The people who've been making it for a couple decades, or the Havana Club producers in Cuba who've been making rum for hundreds of years? Obviously, the expertise goes to the Cuban producers, and as such, it only contains the name Havana, so it should belong to Cuba. Now, it's nothing more than a petty shot at Cuba. Obviously, the embargo for countless decades has been completely ineffective at destabilizing and destroying the nation. This is just one more petty thing that capitalism is trying to do to undermine the achievements, the respect, and the dignity that the Cuban nation has managed all on their own.